Deciding to expand one's operation domestically requires a level of research and analysis before executing such a decision. However, making a decision as to which international target market and mode of entry requires a higher level of research and analysis by the domestic company. Some companies conduct exhaustive research and analysis, while others take a more simplistic approach. For example, I know of one company that had established an international subsidiary, which was charged with the goal of developing and executing a global expansion strategy. This was a good step and showed some thought as to how they wanted to conduct a global expansion strategy. However, for the first several years, while not implicitly stated anywhere, their strategy was to make investments in foreign markets that spoke English. Thus, the investments in the UK and Australia. Every month, global investment opportunities were presented that made some financial sense, but would have been organizationally disruptive and operationally challenging. It wasn't until 5 years after the international subsidiary was formed did it make its first substantial investment in a non-English speaking country. What is the best entry strategy for expanding one's global footprint? This chapter is concerned with two closely related topics: the decision which foreign markets to enter and when to enter them, and the choice of entry mode, which may develop over time based on experience. Regarding the first topic, utilizing an approach based on experience, the three components of strategy dimension are critical to understand. However, let's focus on the first two: market and segment choice. Did you know there are almost 193 countries in the world, not counting the Holy See, the Vatican, and Palestine? All of these countries do not hold the same profit potential that would be attractive to an expanding international company. As we have discussed previously, the selection of a new foreign market is going to ultimately be based on its long-run profitability potential, which includes balancing the benefits, the cost, and risk associated with doing business in that new foreign market. Many foreign markets may look like having potential, but there is an issue of timing. There are advantages and disadvantages for entering the market as a first mover. While a country may look promising, there is a concern about entering the market because of a history. From experience, this is true. In 1988, the company I worked for had identified Chile as a potential target market for investment, and we were ready to make a multi-$100 million investment. For a number of external reasons, it was decided the timing was not right for an investment in Chile. However, by 1991, the Chilean market looked more attractive, and the investment amount had been significantly reduced. We made an investment through an acquisition in 1992, and it turned out to be the right decision. Timing is very important. Customer relationships. Most of the focus is on customer relationship aspect of expanding into a new foreign market. While that is important and should not be discounted, a company should not overlook its relationship with suppliers as well. Expanding into a foreign market can prove to be more successful if it can be done in conjunction with suppliers. It is not uncommon for a company to look at potential markets, see if their suppliers are operating there or in a nearby market. This allows the company to have some confidence in the decision to enter a new foreign market. As an example, the company I worked for was contemplating an investment in a wireless opportunity in Argentina. One of our U.S. suppliers had a significant presence in the country and agreed to be our supplier should we enter the market. That provided a higher degree of confidence for making the decision. There are no right decisions here, just decisions that are associated with different levels of risk and reward. Clearly, the most attractive markets tend to be those that are politically stable and have free market systems. Yet those markets often do not contain the greatest reward. There is a lot to be said for initially selecting markets that provide a higher probability of success but a lower rate of return. As the company learns from its investments in foreign markets and is willing to leverage this learning in making investment decisions related to higher reward markets, one of the most effective ways to enter a new foreign market is to examine the best mode of entry. A company looking to entering into a global business market has three basic decisions to make. 1. Foreign markets to enter, when to enter them, and on what scale. 2. Choice of entry mode. And 3. The role of strategic alliances, which could include cross-shareholding deals, licensing arrangement, formal joint ventures, acquisitions, and startup or greenfield. One of the most common modes of entry is exporting. This mode of entry is primarily for manufacturing companies, although it could be for a service company as well in certain instances. There are some advantages in that this mode avoids the often substantial cost of establishing manufacturing operations in a foreign market and may help the firm achieve experience curve and location economies. However, there are some disadvantages as well, as it may not be appropriate if lower cost locations for manufacturing the product can be found abroad, or high transport costs make exporting uneconomical, particularly for bulk products, and tariff barriers can make exporting really uneconomical. In certain instances, a turnkey project could be a viable entry mode alternative for some companies. There are some advantages to this mode of entry, as it can provide great financial returns and can be less risky than a conventional foreign direct investment. The disadvantages may include a turnkey operation may not provide any long-term interest in the foreign country, and in the case of a turnkey project involving a technology transfer, it may provide a competitive advantage to a potential and or an actual competitor. Licensing is an arrangement where the home country agrees to allow intangible property, like a trademark, to be used by a foreign company, who agrees to abide by strict rules as to how it does business. The domestic company will assist the foreign company in establishing its business under the guidelines set by the domestic company. The domestic company receives a royalty payment based on a percentage of revenues. There are advantages and disadvantages with licensing, but that is expected as the domestic company has minimal financial exposure under this mode of entry. One of the most well-known licensing examples is Coca-Cola, who has licensed its famous trademark to clothing manufacturers. One thing to remember, normally speaking, the domestic company does not have a permanent presence in the foreign market. This is due to the lack of direct involvement in the foreign market. Franchising. Franchising is very similar to licensing. The primary difference between the two, licensing is more product-focused, while franchising is more service-oriented. Like licensing, in franchising, the domestic company agrees to sell intangible property like a trademark to a foreign company, who agrees to abide by strict rules as to how it does business. The domestic company will assist the foreign company in establishing its business under the guidelines established by the domestic company. Like licensing, a royalty payment based on an established percentage of revenues is paid to the domestic company. The key difference between franchising and licensing is the level of presence in the foreign market. Best examples of franchising would be many of the fast food restaurants like McDonald's, Burger King, Starbucks, Pizza Hut. However, did you know 2 Men and a Truck use franchising as a mode of entry into the global business arena and now has over 380 locations globally? A domestic company may decide to enter a foreign market through a joint venture with 2 or more independent companies. This combination could include 2 or more companies from outside of the foreign market, or it could be a combination of companies of 1 or more domestic companies and a company located in the foreign market. For example, the joint venture that I was involved in Argentina consisted of 2 U.S.-based companies and 2 Argentine-based companies. This arrangement was dictated by the requirement of the investment opportunity. However, the percentages were not well defined, so the two U.S.-based companies owned 55% of the Argentine company. While there was a requirement to have a diverse collection of investors, there were other motivators as well: risk and reward sharing, technology sharing, supply chain, and political risk. Acquisitions are considered as a first step for expanding a company's international presence and have to be undertaken very carefully. Most of the time, the acquiring company does not have the organizational knowledge to operate, manage an operation outside of its domestic market. Imagine, as a first international expansion investment, a Minnesota company acquired a company based in Brazil, over 6,000 miles away, at least a 3-hour time difference, and speaks another language, makes managing this foreign market a potential organizational nightmare. An acquisition strategy is best after a company has gained knowledge organizationally from operating in several different foreign markets. Greenfield startup. This is the least likely mode of entry as a first investment into a foreign market. There are some advantages to having 100% ownership of a foreign operation. This allows the company to control all aspects of its foreign located company, especially if it has a technological competitive advantage. Additionally, it allows the domestic company to dictate global strategic coordination and to gain localization knowledge and economy of scale more rapidly. However, generally speaking, pursuing this mode of entry is the most expensive, as the domestic company bears the entire cost of establishing the new operation in a foreign market. This is just the financial cost. There is an organizational cost as well, as there is a need to bring together divergent cultures. This poses many risks to the misunderstanding and miscommunication due to cultural differences. The choice of mode of entry is easy, and not so easy, as everyone has their respective advantages and disadvantages. Furthermore, each mode of entry may not be appropriate for the domestic company seeking global expansion, as it depends upon the industry it operates in. For example, the companies I worked for could only pursue the mode of entry of acquisition or greenfield. A company like Polaris could start with exporting, and when global knowledge and experience has been developed in the organization, the next step could be establishing manufacturing facilities overseas. Making it the decision as to which targeted foreign markets to enter and the mode of entry requires research and analysis by the domestic company. As I mentioned earlier, one of the companies I worked for had established an international subsidiary charged with the goal of developing and executing a global expansion strategy. For the first several years, the only strategy was to make investments in foreign markets without a lot of thought. Finally, after about 5 years of struggling to find the right global expansion strategy, we finally reached the strategy focus. The change came about for two key reasons. One, the senior executive team had gained more knowledge and experience of operating in markets outside of the U.S. And two, the management team has started to incorporate more executives with global operating experience. This was important, as the organization was becoming more in line with the markets we were operating in. First, it was determined which industry we would pursue globally: wireless communications or cellular back then. No more fiber optic network build in India or telecommunication services in large-scale construction projects. The focus was wireless and wireless only. Second, we narrowed the focus to Western Europe and Latin America, playing off of our domestic relationships, who were growing globally as well. Again, with this geographical focus, resources were better utilized across the board. Finally, it was decided that minority investments would be minimized, as it did not fit our strategy. All investments required the company to minimally have involvement in the strategic direction of the company. The preferred choice was to have operating control of the foreign company, but this was not always possible. The strategy was successful as within 10 years, we had investments in 15 countries spanning Europe, Israel, Latin America, and Australia. These operations generated over $4 billion in revenues. Some of the operations were acquisitions, but most were greenfield opportunities. Some were 100% wholly owned subsidiaries. Some were joint ventures where we had the majority control, and others were jointly controlled. In summary, the global business strategy entry will be successful when it is well thought out, organizationally sound, and flexible as needed.